Some stories were forgotten, others were buried, hidden in the shadows of history. This is one of them. In 1962, at the height of the Cold War, the world stood on the edge of something unimaginable, a war that could have ended everything. But what most people don't know, what was never reported, what almost no one saw, is that everything may have come down to a single moment and a single man deep beneath the ocean, far below the surface, in complete darkness. Inside a Soviet submarine, an order was about to be given. An order that could have changed history forever. Launch a nuclear torpedo. Inside that submarine, there was no communication, no certainty, only fear, only pressure, only the belief that war had already begun. Two officers agreed, without hesitation. They believed this was the only choice, but one man, one officer, stood still. He hesitated, he thought, and then he refused. And in that moment, in the silence that followed, he may have saved the entire world. October 1962. The world was divided. Two superpowers watching each other, waiting, the United States and the Soviet Union. Both armed, both prepared, both ready for a war that could destroy everything. At the center of it all was a small island, Cuba, just 90 miles from the American coast. Missiles had been placed there, nuclear missiles capable of striking cities in minutes for the United States. This was not just a threat, it was a direct challenge, something that could not be ignored. For the Soviet Union, it was different. It was strategy. It was defense. It was power. Tension grew, not slowly, but rapidly, day by day, hour by hour, moment by moment. Every decision mattered. Every move was watched. The world held its breath. People went to sleep, not knowing if they would wake up to a world at war. In response, the United States acted. A naval blockade was placed around Cuba. No ships were allowed through. No weapon, no reinforcements. Nothing. It was a line drawn in the ocean, and crossing that line could mean war. Above the surface, everything was visible. Ships, planes, politics. But beneath the surface, hidden from the world, something else was moving. Something silent, something unseen. Soviet submarines already in position. One of those submarines was B-59, a steel vessel moving silently through the dark ocean. Inside it was a man named Vasili Arkhipov, a senior officer, respected, experienced, a man who had seen danger before, a man who understood how fragile things could be. But even he could not fully understand what was about to happen. The submarine had been underwater for days, cut off from the world above. Inside, conditions were getting worse, much worse. The temperature kept rising, higher and higher, until it became unbearable. Over 40 degrees Celsius. The air became thick, heavy, difficult to breathe. Oxygen levels dropped, carbon dioxide increased. Every breath felt harder than the last. Men were exhausted, sweating constantly, clothes soaked, bodies weak, minds slowing down. Focus was disappearing. And then, the worst part, they lost communication with Moscow. No orders, no updates, no confirmation of what was happening above. They were alone, completely alone, surrounded by darkness, surrounded by pressure. Then something changed. A sound, distant at first, then louder, then closer. American warships had found them, and suddenly the silence was broken. Depth charges exploding in the water, not powerful enough to destroy, but strong enough to be felt, to be heard, to be feared. Inside the submarine, it felt like an attack, like war had already begun. Inside the submarine, everything changed. The tension became panic. The captain believed one thing, with absolute certainty. World War III had already started, and they were under attack. There was no doubt in his mind, no hesitation, only urgency, only fear, only action. He gave the order, prepare the nuclear torpedo. Inside that vessel, it was not just another weapon, it was something far more dangerous. A nuclear warhead capable of destroying everything in its path. If launched, there would be no warning, no second chance, no turning back. But there was a rule, a protocol to fire that weapon. 3 officers had to agree, 3 voices, 3 decisions. The captain said yes, the political officer said yes, and then silence. All eyes turned to Arkhipov. In that moment, everything slowed down. The noise faded, the heat pressed in, the air felt heavier. Time felt different. He had a choice: follow the order and launch, or refuse and risk everything. If he was wrong, they could all die. If he was right, launching that torpedo would mean nuclear war. A war that would not stop. A war that would spread. A war that could end millions of lives. All of it resting on one decision, one voice, one moment. He looked around at the men beside him, exhausted, afraid, waiting. And then, after everything, after all the pressure, all the fears, all the uncertainty, he said, no. He refused. He stood his ground, against pressure, against fear, against everything around him. Minutes passed, slow, heavy, uncertain. Minutes that could have changed history forever. Eventually, the submarine surfaced, breaking through the ocean into the open air. And what they saw was not war, not yet. The world above was still standing, still waiting, still on the edge. If that torpedo had been launched, the United States would have responded. The Soviet Union would have answered back. And within hours, the world could have been consumed by nuclear fire. Cities destroyed, lives lost, history rewritten. But none of that happened because of one decision, one moment, one man. There were no headlines, no recognition, no celebration. For years, almost no one knew what had really happened. But history was quietly shaped in the darkness of that submarine by a man who chose not to act. And in doing so, he may have saved millions of lives. Some stories were forgotten, others were buried, hidden in the shadows. This was one of them.